Good afternoon, Rotarians and esteemed guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo, and thank you for joining us today. As we begin our meeting, I'd like to thank and acknowledge this month's sponsor, which is Browning Kuzno and Rotarian Brent Kuzno for your support. Thank you, Brent. There he is. Right there. Thanks, Brent. Before we get started, let's do a quick check-in. So please use the QR code on the screen, or it's probably still in your phone from every Monday meeting when you're already checking in for your membership points, and keep that going. So appreciate your attendance today. At this time, I'd like to ask Kelly Trame to please come to the podium to deliver a reflection and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I love being short. The prayer I found today I thought was very meaningful and very special. I found it from a site called Reform Judaism, and the prayer was written by Alden Solovi. God of history, we yearn for leadership, for the men and women of inspiration and insight, visionaries to build nations and communities in your image. Stewards of dedicated to justice, unafraid to face the challenges of our day, so that our cities and our countries resonate with compassion and health, justice and mercy, kindness and peace. Bless our leaders with the dedication and foresight, fortitude and imagination to solve the complex issues that threaten our future. May they lead us to a time when neighbors embrace and the communities thrive, in a time when liberty and equality reign supreme. Source and shelter, grant safety and security to all nations and communities so that truth and harmony will resound from the four corners of the earth. Let the light of wisdom shine brightly in the halls of power, a beacon of hope for a land and for every people. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Today we are joined by many special guests, and we appreciate their attendance. Thank you for coming to our meeting today. In the interest of time, though, I will not do our usual guest introduction that typically Rotarians do for everyone that they've brought. However, I do want to especially thank our junior achievement fifth-year students who you will see at your tables. They've joined us today for the mayor's presentation. I believe there are about 30 or 35 of them in the room today. Would you please stand if you're part of the junior achievement fifth years? Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it. Also, thank you to our Vocational Services Committee, led by Rotarians Bethany Hefflinger and Anna Colin, for also arranging the JA fifth-year training session that's going to take place after today's meeting immediately. That will be led by Elizabeth Lewin, another Rotarian. They'll be learning about self-awareness, work priorities, as well as conflict resolution. So any Rotarian is invited to stick around, please, afterwards and join this workshop and contribute. Even if you're not on the Vocational Services Committee, it's fine to join. So please consider participating before you leave today. Appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Our club has not heard from the mayor and hosted him since about 2020, as far as I could tell. So I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity during my year as president of Rotary to hear from him, and we very much appreciate his time today. Wade Kapszukiewicz was first elected mayor of Toledo in 2017, becoming the 64th mayor of our city. He previously served as the treasurer of Lucas County from 2005 until 2018. He also served one term on the Lucas County Board of Education and was later a Toledo City Councilman for about 7 years. The mayor received his bachelor's degree in journalism and political science from Marquette University and was valedictorian of the College of Communication, Journalism, and Performing Arts. He also received a master's degree in public policy from the University of Michigan. He worked at a public policy research organization. He served as a manager of planning and development at the Lucas County Mental Health Board and worked at Compass, a social service agency that works with people with drug and alcohol addictions. He also taught at Owens Community College and our own Lord's University. In addition to the mayor's educational and career accomplishments, the mayor is an avid baseball fan and has had research published in the spring 2016 edition of the Society for American Baseball Research Journal. Mayor, I'm just wondering if you could update that since we're getting into playoff season in your spare time. That'd be all right? Okay, appreciate that. Rotarians, please join me in welcoming Mayor Wade Kapszukiewicz.
Can I put these here? All right. It is afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. I suppose I always knew when I was. Oh, we're already on slide number 1. This is so fun. I suppose I knew as a young person growing up that I wanted to be a published author, and so I figured, what would it be? The Harvard Law Review, New England Journal of Medicine? No, the Society for American Baseball Research. So I am literally a sabermetrics dork. You know, this is the Moneyball nerd part of my brain. So there's really nowhere I can take the conversation other than that. But I don't know why I'm always so embarrassed whenever someone reads my biography. You read it just as I wrote it, so it shouldn't be embarrassing. And the last time I spoke to the Rotary was actually 2018, the one and only time. And I'll let others judge whether today I am half the mayor than I was back then, but I'm certainly half the man. I have really gotten addicted to, in particular, bicycling and other kinds of exercise, so I'm just a slightly smaller person than I was in 2018, but as was the case in 2018, I am honored to be here today and really excited to have been invited to talk just a little bit about Toledo and really where Toledo is. I think the assignment, as I was given it, was just to sort of give a snapshot of where we are as a community, maybe where we're going, but primarily, you know, if we were to do a snapshot of Toledo, how are we doing? You know, what is Toledo's story? I will be the first to admit, not the first to admit, but to say that Toledo is not perfect. There's no question. There are no perfect cities. God knows I am not a perfect mayor, and if you need witness for my lack of perfection, my wife just works around the corner of the courthouse. She'll be able to give you chapter and verse of all the many things that make me imperfect. So Toledo isn't perfect, but I don't think the standard is perfection. I think the standard is progress. And how, while we are imperfect as a city, while in particular our median income is lower than we want it to be, our educational attainment for young people in our community is lower than it needs to be, while our population is declining, all of those things represent real challenges, frankly, real problems for our community. It's also the case that whatever ails Toledo didn't happen overnight, and so to fix these problems isn't going to happen overnight either. No, we are not perfect, but I think we are making progress, and I think there are some tangible data points to show that we are making progress. So I just want to jump through what, in my judgment, might be the 4 major categories where I feel like there's been noticeable progress in the last 5 to 10 years. And then I might spend my last few minutes talking about an area that I believe deserves our real focus and energy as we go forward. So that's kind of the agenda that I hope to execute. I will say that this presentation is a much shorter, condensed version of my State of the City speech I gave earlier in the year. And when you're mayor, you have people who do things like move the PowerPoint along for you to make you look like you know what you're doing. Today I am on my own, so it is anyone's guess as to whether these slides are going to align with what I'm saying, so be gentle. When I talk about making progress, I think the first area we have to talk about is public safety. And these numbers show our story, at least when it comes to the kind of public safety that I think people most emotionally connect to, and that is the worst kind of crime, the worst kind of violent crime, and that is homicides. The fact of the matter is, in the midst of COVID, like so many other cities around the country, we saw more violence than any of us could bear. And we saw a spike in homicides, for sure. But our numbers have gone down year after year after year, 4 years in a row, year after year after year, and we are on pace to go down next year again, which would be 4 straight years of decline. Homicides went down from 22 to 23 by 30%. Then the next year they went down by an additional 18%. And then even as you know the way percentages work, it should be harder to enjoy percentage decreases as you go along, but the next year it was 34%. And this year, as we stand here now, last year we had 37 homicides in the city of Toledo, and today on September 29th we have 28. We're on pace to this would be, again, yet another reduction in that most emotional and heartbreaking kind of crime. Now, I want to be clear, this is always difficult for anyone to talk about, because the numbers we want up here are 0. We want there to be 0 homicides. And even though intellectually I think we probably recognize that's not attainable in Toledo or any other city, that is still our goal. And we're not going to celebrate the fact that only X number of individuals lost their lives. Every single one is a tragedy and something that represents a loss to our community. However, it is worth pointing out that when it comes to homicides, we're about half of where we were just 4 years ago. And if you want to look at our 30-year averages, right now Toledo, what we are seeing on this statistic is about what the average has been in our community for the last 50 years. Now, we could celebrate that or bemoan it, but we are in line with, for better or for worse, what has been normal for Toledo for the span of 50 years. Normal isn't perfect, and it's not what we want it to be, but we have come down from a dark place in our city and have made some real improvement. We actually are experiencing fewer homicides in our city now than we had in 1993, 1994, 2012. We are we're at the same level as we were from much of the last 10 years. So, and the story, let me see, here we go, it's my first test. Well, we already just talked about that. Here we go. The story I just told for homicides can be told in every category that we measure. In other words, literally every single type of crime we measure, whether it's auto theft, burglary, homicides, rape, all of them, they're all down, year after year after year, category after category. You might believe in your gut that crime is still too high. You're entitled to that opinion. Like John Adams said, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. The fact of the matter is, we're lower in every category we measure year after year after year. Now, I think it would shock people to the disconnect that might present, because it might not feel that way. It doesn't maybe feel that the numbers are going down. Our national crime rate, compared to where it was 35 years ago. What is our national crime rate compared to what it was 35 years ago? God, it's got to be so much worse. I don't remember the National Guard being sent to Portland and Chicago and Washington. It's got to be out of control. The national crime rate in our country is half of what it was in 1990. Half. Do you know what we do have more of, though, than we had in 1990? Cell phones. And the reality is, I think part of what we have to emotionally understand as a public, as we make decisions, whether it's at election time or around the water cooler, is that the reality is, even though crime is drastically less than it was 35 years ago, and drastically less than it was in Toledo 4 years ago, If we don't feel it, it could be because 35 years ago, when crime was half of what it was, when crime was twice what it was today, our pocket didn't vibrate with a breaking news alert telling us that something bad was happening. Our other, the little beeper on our belt didn't start vibrating with a breaking news alert. It's good. It's a good thing that we have access to information that we never had before. It's a really good thing that our police officers have body cams to help the accountability on both sides of that equation. But it's also the case it makes things more present in our lives and has the ability of potentially distorting our sense of reality. America was twice as dangerous as it was in 1990. Sure don't feel that way. And one of the reasons is because we're so much more aware of the bad things that happen through breaking news alerts. It's neither good nor bad, but it is just something that I think, should think about as a public as we continue into what next year will be our 250th year of our experiment in American democracy. There is a huge disconnect between reality and perception, and I don't know that there's any issue where that disconnect is more real than on the question of public safety. Regardless, moving on, operating under the premise that things in Toledo are much safer than they were last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe the more interesting question from the standpoint of public policy is why? Why are things so much better in Toledo on that score? And I would point to 2 things. I don't think we have a slide on them, but we don't. That doesn't come till later. I point to a couple reasons. One, we have grown the size of our police force. When I became mayor, there were 580 police officers on the streets. Today, there's 630. That's not as many as we wish we had. I wish we had more. But a net gain of 50 officers is a big move in the right direction, especially since the 22 years previous to me taking office, the size of the force had gradually declined from about 710, 20 some years ago, to 580 the day that I became mayor. After 22 years of decline, to stop that decline and add a net of 50 more officers is hard to do. There's a budget component to it, but it's part of why I think we're seeing better outcomes, because you do need a certain number of police officers on the street if you want the officers to be able to get out of their squad cars, walk around, and develop relationships with the business owners and the citizens, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of debate in this country about defunding the police. I don't know if there's any cities that do that. Toledo ain't one of them. We have grown our budget. We've grown the size of our police force. You might remember about a year ago, there was news that Jeep was going to there were going to be huge layoffs at Jeep. And we were preparing our 2025 budget at that time. And so we thought that, okay, we're going to only be able to have a 30-officer police class, I think. And so we prepared a budget at that amount. As soon as we received the good news in late December that it was a false alarm and actually Stellantis was reinvesting in Jeep, and in fact, not only would there not be layoffs, there would be job growth, the literally first thing we did was to bump the size of our police force, our police class, up from 30 to 45. So we believe in that, maybe to a fault, but we're a team that believes that you need to invest in public safety. We have a grassroots initiative called MONSE, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, that puts grassroots, non-police officers sort of in the neighborhoods, metaphorically with their ear to the ground, trying to head off problems before they become homicides. Sometimes these are called violence interrupters. You might know them that way, but I do know that we have them now in several different high schools. And they've been able to calculate a dollar amount for the cost of human life. I believe the worst thing about a homicide is the loss of a human life, and I hope you agree with me. But even if you were one of those sort of cold-hearted statisticians that only cares about dollars and cents, every homicide in this community costs the taxpayers about $900,000 in cost of the policing, the first responders, the detectives, the public defender, the trial, the incarceration, et cetera. So if you go back, come on, can I do it? If you go back to this and you notice that in the last year that we had full data for homicides, we enjoyed a decrease of 8 from 45 to 37. You could think about that in a lot of ways. You could also think about it to say, geez, we saved $7.1 million. So by having eight fewer homicides is $7.1 million in saved taxpayer money. So I think the most important part of the discussion is human life, but even if you are more worked up about taxes and your tax burden, the fact that we are doing better in terms of public safety is saving us real dollars. And the final thing I would say in terms of why we're seeing better outcomes on public safety is the investments we're making in youth. For the last 4 years, the city of Toledo has spent $7.2 million in different youth programs. We offer them year-round, but primarily during the summer. Summer jobs. We think having young people, giving them the ability to make a little money is good, but also just youth activities. Over almost 200,000 youth participated in 322 different programs that we've offered. I want to make this clear, that's not 200,000 distinct individuals. That could be, well, it could be the same youth participating in one of our programs 200,000 times. That's unlikely. But I can imagine that some of those are frequent flyers. If you have someone who attends 15, of our, podcasting lessons or whatever it is, that adds up. But that's still touching young people in a positive way. Our attitude is anything positive that provides something hopeful in the life of a young person is something that we want to be about. It's not just sports. I think some people say, oh yeah, great, youth sports during the summer. We have youth sports also, but when I say there's 322 different programs that we funded over these last 4 years, there are classes or opportunities for podcasting. You want to learn how to code, you want to learn how to cook, urban garden. Heck, we had one, I don't think we had it last year, but 2 years ago, if you want to learn how to ride a horse. I think we had scuba diving this year. Anything that will give a kid a positive experience, we're going to fund it, and the numbers show that kids are going to participate in it. Is that the only reason that crime has gone down? No. Something as complex as crime isn't caused by one thing. It's not going to be solved by doing what, but it's the combination of everything. It's the combination of more police, fighting blight better and more aggressively, youth interrupters at the school level, youth programming, et cetera. The second big area where I believe it's undeniable that we're making progress is in the area of economic development. I don't really have time to get into all of the things, but just from a top level, Site Selection Magazine is kind of seen as the Bible of economic development, at least from a city's perspective. This year we were 9th in the country, not 9th in Ohio, not 9th in the Great Lakes region, but 9th in the entire nation for new business investment. And by finishing 9th this year, that means for 8 out of the last 11 years, we've finished in the top 10. That's well. You see it in investments like this at the Wayman Palmer YMCA that we built, but more notably, think even just 10 years ago. 10 years ago, what we now know as the Glass City Metro Park was really the road to nowhere. Remember that? It was just kind of a road that went by where the sports arena used to be, and it was hoping to attract development. That's what most of the last 20 years looked like, and that's certainly what I inherited. Northtown Mall was a vacant blight. Southwick was vacant. Now, there are jobs being produced at Southwick. At Northtown, there is a tier 1 supplier to the auto industry that we built. Mobis has invested $28 million, brought 200 high-paying manufacturing jobs to that site. And the marina, the road, it's not a road to nowhere anymore, it's the Glass City Metro Park. So all of, transitioning those long vacant spaces into positive economic energy has been a plus. Even the Jefferson Center, which we now call the Innovation Post, has been brought online. It is almost entirely full now, about 200 jobs in, again, what had been sort of a vacant, underused space. It's not just the big picture projects that have helped us win these economic awards. On a small business level, we've created something called the Vibrancy Initiative, which is a loan program to get money in the hands of small businesses. Last year alone, we leveraged $21 million of private investment on 18 different projects and activated about 132,000 square feet of small business space in a way that has been positive. It's one of the reasons a guy named Brandon Selhorst, who I think sometimes comes to these luncheons, who's the city's economic development director, won the Ohio Economic Development Professional of the Year last year. We're not perfect, again, that's the theme. We're making real progress, and economic development is one of those areas as well. When it comes to progress, I like to talk about making progress in infrastructure, and I think, again, maybe most emotionally we connect with roads, but it's worth pointing out that in the last 5 to 7 years, we have eliminated all lead service lines that used to exist in the city. If you remember, we have the trauma of what happened to us on the alga blooms and our water problem about 10 years ago. But if you remember, around the same time, something happened in Flint that was slightly different. In Flint, the source of their water was just fine. It was deep, it was cold, it was not poisonous, but it was passing through lead-encrusted pipes, so that nice, clean water became poisoned by the time it got to the tap. We didn't have nearly as many examples of that, but we had some. And one of the first expenditures we did as part of the American Rescue Plan was to take $10 million and eliminate once and for all lead service lines in our city, so that can't happen. We've finished the improvements at the Collins Park Water Treatment Plant. We're beginning 20 years of improvements at the Bayview Treatment Plant. Over half of all city parks have received major upgrades. I think it's 59% of the parks, major upgrades in the last 5 years. So infrastructure in general, I think you can make the argument we're doing better, and nowhere is that more clear, and nothing do I talk more about than roads, because roads, you see just such a clear difference. In 2020, the city of Toledo resurfaced 2.88 lane miles, and that was 7 different roads. Not 7 lane miles, parts of 7 roads. Then the Toledo Roads Levy passed, and overnight, just like that, the numbers of what we were able to achieve on road repair grew 15-fold. So instead of fixing 2.88 lane miles, we now fix about 50 lane miles per year. Okay, I guess the next year was 44, 51, 30, we're up about 40, 45 lane miles per year every year. And we're not fixing parts of 7 roads. Now it's parts of about 110, 120 roads year after year, every year. Look how scattershot it was. So you'd have years like 2017 in the past where, okay, they must have cobbled together a few nickels to do some roads that year. That's great. But the year before, 2016, they didn't spend a single penny refixing a single road anywhere. Not one road anywhere in a city of 280,000 people was fixed. None. Not one pothole filled, no road fixed. The next year, 2017, was a little better, but it was just unreliable and unpredictable. And so we felt that to do it right, we had to make a serious commitment that we're going to be spending $25 million. It's in a lockbox that it can only be spent on roads. Year in, year out, every year, the only thing it can do is fix roads. 2 things can be true at the same time. We can be doing a better job fixing roads than we have ever done before as a city, and we are. And we can still have a lot of terrible roads that need to be fixed. They're not mutually exclusive, and in fact, our reality is exactly that. We're in the snow belt. We are living in a part of the country where the weather is tough on our roads, and we have a lot of terrible roads. But we are also fixing them at a rate that we never have before in the city. If you are a glass half empty person, you lament the pothole that you could well hit on the drive back to your office. If you're glass half full, you might say to yourself, well, damn, they're fixing 15 times more than they were just 5 years ago. I guess I will let you decide whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, but the story is the same. And then the final area where I think we can show real, tangible improvement or progress is in our fiscal management. And I want to make a distinction about what fiscal management doesn't mean that we are awash in cash. I'm going to get to that in a second. No, I'm talking about fiscal management. Every year, and in fact, we're about to leave in about 2 weeks for our annual trip, but every year we have to head to Wall Street and sit down with Standard & Poor's and Moody's and talk about the city's finances, and they establish our bond rating. Well, when we did that last year, for the first time in 14 years, the big bonding houses improved the city's bond rating. It's hard to get an upgrade, and for the first time in 14 years, we did. That not everyone might understand. Well, what does that mean? Well, it basically means that now, with a better bond rating than we've had any time in the last 14 years, now when the citizens have to pay back the debt that the city might borrow whenever we're fixing a road or a sewer, now they're paying back less. So this isn't as exciting and jazzy maybe as some of the other things we do, but this saves real money. And what I like about it is that it comes from an objective third-party umpire, as it were. So in other words, look, I get it. Maybe you are saying to yourself, well, of course, he's the mayor. He's going to say good things about himself. Okay. And when I have opponents, they're going to want to point out everything bad that's happening. I get it. It's all part of the theater, I suppose. But I assure you, those folks on Wall Street could care less about me or my opponent, or they don't care. They just look at the numbers. And when they do a deep dive into the numbers and those numbers tell about Toledo, they give us, they give us good marks, better marks than we've had in about a decade and a half. And another demonstration of that can be seen in our rainy day fund. Even at the end of this year, not at the beginning of this year, but at the end of 2025, in, what is that, October, November, we've got about 100 days left in the year, maybe, less than that, I don't know. We're October, November, December. 90 days from now, when the year ends, we're going to have about $60 million in our rainy day fund. And that's after everything we've been through. That's after getting through COVID. After all of that, we'll have $60 million in our rainy day fund. Look how much we had in the rainy day fund 2 years before I became mayor. We have 15 times more in our reserves than we had 10 years ago. We can feel good about this or not good about it, but it'd be hard to say that it doesn't represent progress. And so in a number of areas, public safety, economic development, infrastructure, fiscal management, it's pretty clear that we're making some real progress. And I suppose if I were a normal politician and I would stop here, the balloons would fall, the confetti, the music, and I would be lifted off, with people waving palm. But it's pretty clear I'm not normal. I think I've proven that time and again. And so it is worth pointing out at this point, and for my last remaining minutes, that despite this progress, we still have some real challenges. And I want to talk about what those are and maybe some ideas of how we can pursue a better path in the future. It is, despite our rainy day fund and our financial position, et cetera, it is also the case that we are eating into our rainy day fund, and that we do have a structural budget deficit. We have to rob Peter to pay Paul to make sure our budget is passed. Well, how can that be true? Or more to the point, why is that happening? I think it is tempting and maybe normal to say, well, it must be bloated, inefficient government spending. Government doesn't know, they're so incompetent, they don't know what they're doing, they're just, they're spending too much. Well, let's think about that. Let's talk about it. Our tax rate in Toledo, 2.5% income tax, is the same as all these other cities. We're at the same, for years we were lower. We had the 2.25%, but as I alluded to earlier, in 2020, we passed an additional 0.25% that can only be spent on roads. When we did that, that raised Toledo's income tax to 2.5%, thus putting us in line with what every other, not every city, but every big city does. So it's not that we're taxing our citizens too much, we're taxing them exactly the same as everyone else does. And here, I'm glad you're all sitting down, because what I'm about to say will probably, when I talked about the difference in perception between the reality of crime and perception, you thought there was a disconnect there. What I'm about to say could provide an even bigger disconnect that would knock you off your feet onto your chair, so you're already one step ahead of me. It must be that, okay, if our tax rate's the same, it must be that we're spending too much. And you know what, Toledo, as this graph shows, Toledo probably does have a spending problem. And you know what that spending problem is? We don't spend nearly enough. That's our real problem. We don't spend enough on ourselves, because as this graph shows, all of these other cities who have the same tax rate as we do are spending more per capita than Toledo. Toledo spends less per capita than any other big city in Ohio by a wide margin, not by a little bit, by a wide margin. And when you break down every department of our city, we spend less on everything. So it's not like we spend less in general, but we actually spend more on police. But the reason that we're less is because we spend so little on parks. No, we spend less on everything. We spend less than these other cities on police, and on fire, and on parks, and on kids, and on infrastructure, and on everything. And when you add it all up, surprise, surprise, we spend less on it. So do we have a spending problem? Sure, you bet. We don't spend nearly enough. Now, how does that? No one in this room was ready for that, because your understandable perception of after 30, 40, 50, 60 years on Earth is that we're all wasteful, drunken sailors. The reality is Toledo spends less than everyone. Everyone. You could make an argument that to improve the things that ail us, we need to spend more. But wait a second, that's what's happening here? How can How can all of this be true? Toledo doesn't have a spending problem. We have a revenue problem. The reason all these other cities are able to spend more while taxing themselves at the same rate we do is because they are wealthier communities. And so the 2.5% income goes further in Dayton and Akron and Cincinnati and Columbus. We are poorer at the median taxpayer than those other cities. And so I just need everyone to understand we will never be able to cut our way out of this problem. Never. Unless you want to cut police and fire, which none of us want to do. Police and fire is like 70% of our budget. So if you think to fill our structural budget deficit, not only would we have to cut, let's say, from the fire department, we would have to eliminate the entire fire department. Nobody wants to do that. We're not doing that. So if the reality is that Toledo doesn't have a spending problem, but we have a revenue problem, well, then there's only two solutions to that. We could either raise taxes, which nobody wants to do, or we could add population, which everyone should want to do. We have a revenue problem. And sometimes when people hear that, that's a prelude to a tax increase. Well, that is one way to get revenue. The other way to get more revenue is to bring in more taxpayers. And so this gets to what I believe is the moment that Toledo faces as we go forward over however many remaining years I have in office, and it is housing. We are at a moment as a city where we are ready to grow. Look, we're in this part of the country. Call it what you want. You want to call it the Snow Belt, Rust Belt. I think those are derisive terms. I prefer to call us the Water Belt, since we sit on 20% of all fresh water on planet Earth. And there will be a day when the world looks at the Great Lakes region the way right now we look at the Middle East. In other words, that part of the world where the most valuable commodity on Earth resides. But nonetheless, no one calls it the Water Belt now, although I think they will one day. Regardless, all of these communities in this part of the country have taken it on the chin over 70 years. And it's not just Toledo, it's Buffalo, it's Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, Fort Wayne, they all have. 70 years of population loss, 70 years of factory closures, economic pressure. And it'd be a whole other conversation about why this has happened. Is it NAFTA? Is it bad trade deals? Is it the pressure of globalization? Is it the ease of travel? It's probably always been more enjoyable to live in Phoenix or Atlanta, but it was hard to get there. And before there was air conditioning, no one wanted to live there. Little subtle things you might not think about have made it easier to want to move out of the areas where it snows to the areas where it's nice, and now air conditioned. We're not going to do anything about that. We've all taken a gut punch, all of the cities in this part of the country. But some of those cities are starting to grow again. Nope, that's wrong slide. So Buffalo is starting to tiptoe up the right direction again. Detroit, not Southeast Michigan, not Wayne County, but this municipal corporation of Detroit grew last year for the first time since 1957. That was also the last year the Lions won the championship, so I thought that maybe there'd be a correlation, but no, they blew it. They blew it in the playoffs anyhow. My attitude is, well, heck, if they can start growing again in Detroit, well, then they can do it in Toledo. So we did a study. Our 10-year housing study showed that when you think about supply and demand, the problem that Toledo faces isn't demand. Whatever you may feel in your heart about all of the reasons that people decide to live somewhere, crime or perceptions of crime, quality of public schools, infrastructure, whatever it is, that's baked into the cake. Baked into that cake is demand. And yet, coming out on the tail end of that report was a sense that Toledo would have about 12,000 more citizens if we had housing to support 12,000 more citizens. In other words, our problem is supply. It is not demand. We don't have the kind of housing to support growth, even though the market is ready for it to happen. So what we need to do is get creative about how we can add to our supply of housing, because that is what we need to do to grow our population. It's not demand. Whatever you think about the schools or the crime or whatever, good for you. That's baked into the cake already. And what the reports show is that our population would be 10,000 people higher if we had housing for it. You might say, well, how can this be true? Realtor.com says Toledo's the cheapest market in the country, and Wall Street Journal put us, yep, all that's true. And if what you want in your life is a 1959 ranch-style house, then you're in good shape. But there are other parts of the market that we don't have. And so we have to get really creative, and we have some ideas on how to do it. We need more of everything, first of all. We need more market rate, like Frank Cass did at the Marina, and now he's doing over at the Colony. We need more affordable, like we invested at the Glen and the Grand, the old Southland Shopping Center. We need more workforce. We need more everything, everything. Right now, and the city of Toledo gets it, right now the city is we have our fingerprints maybe on about 23 different housing projects. When you add them all up, they bring about 1,900 more units online, which is great, but what's 2,000, divided by 10,000? That's about, we're at 1/5, that's 1/5 of what we need. So the housing projects we're working on right now are great, and it's 1/5 of what our market is ready to produce. We have to be creative. I'm not here to make any announcements today, but we have to be creative as we look forward on where we might be able to plat new market rate subdivisions. I know when the Tamaran Golf Course went away a couple years ago, we very quietly were aggressive in trying to get our hands on it to have that be a newly platted subdivision. When was the last time a new subdivision was platted in Toledo? 1981, 82? So we tried, and that would have been attractive because we could have put about 700 or 800 homes back in there. It would have been in the Washington Local School District. There could have been some advantages, but speaking of Washington Local, they beat us to the punch. They bought it, and now they built some athletic fields back there, and good. They need that too, that's fine. There's enough land for us to do both. There are 2 golf courses on Heather Downs Avenue right now, both right across the street from each other. I love golf. Do we need 2? Do we need 2? What if we had 1? Maybe the other could be a site where there are 1,100 new Toledoans. So big picture, we got to be creative in how we seek to bring these 10,000 units online for us to add population. Adding population is another way of saying avoid a tax increase, which none of us want. But there's one other idea that I think is creative, and it's maybe really where the city can be most creative. This talks about our housing shortage. Our downtown vacancy rates in America are real, and this was happening before COVID, but only exacerbated with COVID. The fact of the matter is, jobs aren't returning to downtowns the way they used to. I still call it the fiberglass tower. Now it's the tower on the Maumee that Nick Ide and his team own. When it was built, it was full to the gills of Owens Corning employees. The fiberglass tower is full again. It's not full with Bill Betchenstein and his OC executives anymore. It's full of people living there. And that conversion from office space to residential could be an answer to what ails us as a city. Most cities have this problem now. Even in the great cities of America, the LAs and New Yorks and Chicagos, you'll see 20% of all of their office space vacant. Well, Toledo, we're a little worse than that. We're about 10% above that national average. 30% of our space is vacant. And if you want to put an even finer point on it, think about it in terms of, where is it? This right here. Right now, we have 1.6 million square feet of vacant office space in Toledo. That's totally vacant office space in downtown Toledo. That would be the equivalent from a square feet perspective of the Franklin Park Mall. But if you look at buildings, let's say like 1 Seagate or 4 Seagate, buildings like that aren't totally empty, but they're only partially full, you put that online, that's an additional 1.6 million square feet of vacant office space. So in the downtown of Toledo, what we have right now are the space equivalent of 2 Franklin Park malls. Yet, if there is one neighborhood in Toledo that is growing, it's actually the part that we don't think of as a neighborhood. It's downtown. Since the year 2000, the city of Toledo has lost 43,000 people. We've talked about that. Populations all over the Midwest have gone down. But yet, even as our population has gone down by 43,000 people over the last 25 years, the population of this neighborhood, the downtown neighborhood, the warehouse district neighborhood, has grown by about 1,500 people. And that's grown by about 32%, even as the city at large has gone down. Clearly, there is a demand, at least for this part of the neighborhood. And so I think what we have to do for this part of the city, we have to be creative about taking these old spaces that used to be office space and convert them to mixed-use residential, like Nick Ide has done at Owens Corning, and like we're trying to do at the Spitzer Building. And I guess I have a proposal that could make it, these are the spaces, I already said this. These, if you add up all these places that are totally vacant, that adds up to 1 Franklin Park Mall. And if you put the partially vacant, it's 2 Franklin Park Malls. The city, once before, got in the business of trying to convert old vacant commercial space into residential. Where is it? Oh, I already talked about that. That's us having 2,000 units that we're working on right here. If you remember, Museum Place, Hillcrest, Commodore Perry, the LaSalle, they were all vacant 30 years ago, all vacant. Now they are all full. Every one of those is full with people living there. That is a good thing. And converting those old spaces into residential is part of what helped create a downtown that could sustain the walleye and the mud hens and all that other good stuff. But if there was one thing about the model that was used that was imperfect, was that the city, what the city did is they took out a $30 or $25 million general obligation bond. This is 30 years ago. And the city has been paying about $1.6 million in interest payments ever since. And those profits have been sent to, I believe it is Madison, Wisconsin, which is where a guy named Randy Alexander lives, and Randy owned many of those buildings. I have been known to pick on Cardi sometimes from time to time. I'm not picking on him here, because actually I'm glad that there are people living in all of these places. I don't know that we'd have the mud hens across the street and the walleye without it. But if there is something that could be improved upon what Cardi did 30 years ago, is as we seek this new era of converting the Spitzer buildings and buildings like this, maybe we can figure out a way to keep those profits in Toledo so that we can pay ourselves back as opposed to enriching someone who lives in Madison, Wisconsin that has never stepped foot in Toledo for the last 28 years. What I think we should do is to try to get a public entity, whether it is, I think the one that makes most sense would be the land bank, but it could be the city. So the public would own it, enter into a 45-year ground lease, let's say, as long as we're talking about the Spitzer building. Once again, we issue the 30-year, $25 million of bonds, and as fate would have it, the $1.6 million in interest payments that we've been paying on these are cycling off the books next year. We're finally done paying for all this. Randy Alexander from Madison, Wisconsin is finally about to get paid back. So we could undertake the same financial enterprise without it feeling any different to City Council and City Hall, because we've been making that $1.6 million of payments anyhow. So without doing anything to our budget that feels like an additional burden, indeed doing exactly the same thing we've been doing for 30 years, we can bring online some of these $1.6 million of vacant space, whether it's Spitzer, whether it's whatever it is, the Nicholas Building, the NASB, with a funding stream that is hiding in plain sight right in front of our nose. And we could keep those profits here. So the city would provide a patient capital loan to the project. Loan repayments would be made with available cash from the project. The annual debt service is the same that we've been paying, et cetera. It's just a creative way to bring more space online that doesn't feel like an additional cost to the city. We have to continue to do things on housing at an aggressive pace. Again, the Colonnade Lofts, Frank Cass, 262 new market rate units, but the Grand and the Glen are about 150 new units. We've done that. We got to keep doing it, because all that we're doing is only about 1/5 of what the market would bear. We've done a lot to sort of protect the housing that we have. We've provided mortgage assistance to 300 first-time homeowners, $4 million of grants toward helping people purchase a home that couldn't have done it in the past. And there's another creative program that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but if we're talking about growing our city, I think it's important, and I think the symbolism of what it would mean is important too. It's the Toledo Police Next Door program. Over the last 3 years, we've provided 25, and this is all privately, this is all from the generosity of private donors. The city has not put tax money into this. These are private donors who, incredibly, don't want to be named, even though I try to give them awards and thank them for it. They don't want their names out there. put $25,000 of down payment assistance for a Toledo police officer for any home in Toledo. It's essentially a second mortgage, requires no payments. After 5 years, the loan is forgiven. You have to be a full-time police officer, and this has to be your primary place of residence. But in the last 2 or 3 years, there have been about 20 or so police officers who've moved, from wherever they were living, Sylvania, Springfield, Maumee, into Toledo. Those little things help. All of this adds up and helps. So I think we've done a lot in our time together. I'm proud the crime is down 4 years in a row in every category. I'm proud that Southwick and Northtown and the Marina Project aren't vacant eyesores, but now places of economic vitality. I'm proud that we're fixing roads at a clip 15 times greater than we were before. Proud that our rainy day fund is 15 times larger than it was 10 years ago. Proud that we created a regional water commission a few years ago that no one thought we'd be able to do, so we make our regional water decisions collectively, not down the barrel of a shotgun. I'm proud that we have no lead lines anymore in the city, that the Collins Park water plant is fixed, and that we're fixing Bayview, that we've offered over 300 youth programs to kids over the last 4 years. We've built a new YMCA. We're making some progress, but we're not where we need to be yet. And when we think of the future, the biggest single thing we need more than anything else is more of us. And to get more of us, we need to meet our supply challenge. We need about 10,000 units more housing to meet what the market says exists here. We're getting there. We're taking baby steps in the right direction. But for these last 4 years and 3 months that I have in office, it's going to be a focus on these housing issues to help set Toledo up better for the future. So I don't know if that was what I was supposed to talk about or not. I don't know if I went over time, but I'm done one way or another. So thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, stay for a moment. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming today. We're not going to have time for questions. I also want to give, obviously, the JA students an opportunity to be able to mix with the Rotarians today. But we really appreciate your time and giving us kind of an idea about what the state of the city is and some vision for the future. In appreciation for your attending today, we do have a gift, a book by the name of The Historical Tales of Toledo, which you may have a copy of already. I'm not sure. But
This is my favorite copy.
Oh, great. Yeah, exactly. Written by our own past president, Clint Mock. We appreciate it. Maybe it'll make or maybe the first one will make a good gift to somebody for you at some point. And we'll also make a donation in your name to the Polio Plus Fund, which is Rotary International's efforts to eradicate polio from the face of the planet. So again, thank you for your time today, Mr. Mayor. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, next Monday, October 6th, we will not be here. Instead, we will be doing what Rotarians do best. We will be out in the community giving back. And so we will do our quarterly Service Above Self Day next Monday. If you haven't already signed up for a project, please hit that QR code, or you can find it in the spoke and sign up for a project now. There's multiple options in terms of the service that you can provide to the community for next Monday in lieu of our meeting. There are no committee meetings this afternoon. However, as I mentioned before, Vocational Services will be hosting the JA fifth years in the room here, so please stick around if you have the opportunity. And otherwise, I appreciate your time today. Please go out and unite some folks for good. We are adjourned.